I've spoken on this subject many times on the floor. The people who are affected by violence against women wonder why the Congress has delayed so on the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, a bill we passed here in the Senate. If you're a victim of violence, you can't understand such delays. So I think it's time for the Senate and the House to come together to pass the Leahy-Crapo Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, for the other body to do what we did overwhelmingly in the United States Senate. Earlier this week, I read in the Burlington Vermont Free Press, a story of Carmen Tarleton. She's a woman from Thetford, Vermont. Thetford, Vermont is a small, quiet, beautiful little town in our state. 5 years ago, Carmen's estranged husband broke into her home. He beat her with a baseball bat. He poured industrial-strength lye on her, severely burning a great deal of her body and nearly blinding her. Her doctors said that she had suffered the most horrific injury a human being could suffer. Today, of course, she is still disfigured and continues to experience pain from these injuries of 5 years ago. And stories like hers remind me that every day we do not pass VAWA, more people are suffering. I ask consent that a copy of the article I referred to be included in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, the distinguished presiding officer was a strong supporter of this bill. On the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, as many of our colleagues were on both sides of the aisle. We tried to keep this as a nonpartisan, even beyond bipartisan, a nonpartisan bill, because certainly my experience has been that the violence occurs not because you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. Violence against women occurs in all strata, in all categories. So Senator Crapo and I put together our bill after listening to victims and the professionals who work with them every day. We did not want provisions in our bill included to score political points. They were there to address the urgent needs of vulnerable victims. That was the one thing we wanted. This wasn't a Democratic or Republican bill. This was to address vulnerable victims. One key provision in our bipartisan bill would allow tribal courts limited jurisdiction to consider domestic violence offenses committed by non-Indians against Indian women on tribal lands. And I relied on the experiences of Senator Crapo and others who come from states where there are tribal lands. And as we went into this and talked to the leaders of various tribes around this country, I heard that the violence against Native women is not only appalling, as we knew, but it's become an epidemic. It's reported that almost 3 in 5 Native women have been assaulted by their spouses or intimate partners. And much of the violence is committed by non-Native Americans, non-Indians. Federal and state law enforcement may be hours away, and lack of resources to respond to these cases, while tribal courts lack jurisdictions to consider these cases. So what happens, the perpetrators are, in effect, immune from the law. And the worst part about it, Mr. President, they know they're immune from the law. So the jurisdiction provision that passed the Senate and the Leahy-Crapo bill would be a significant step toward addressing this horrific problem, but also would ensure that no abuser is above the law. Even though our tribal provision is limited and guarantees comprehensive rights, House Republicans have objected to it. So I want to come to the Senate today and be able to report to my colleagues what I hope is a breakthrough on this issue and this important bill. Two conservative House Republicans with leadership positions in the Republican House majority have introduced a reasonable middle ground position regarding tribal jurisdiction. Representative Ice of California, Representative Cole of Oklahoma have introduced the Violence Against Indian Women Act, H.R. 6625. Now, the Ice of Cole bill includes a provision that allows defendants to remove a case to federal court if any defendant's rights are violated. This modification should ensure that only those tribes that are following the requirements of law and providing full rights can exercise jurisdiction, and the defendants can raise challenges at the beginnings of a case. The House Republican leadership should give serious consideration to this Republican proposal so we can move forward and protect thousands of victims, not non-Native Americans and Native Americans. The National Congress of American Indians has sent a letter and urged Senator Crapo and me to take a serious look at the Ice of Cole provisions. We are. I'm consulting with senators on both sides of the aisle regarding this proposal so we can find a way forward. I urge the House Republican leadership to do so as well. Mr. President, I ask consent that a copy of the NCAI letter be included in the record at the conclusion of my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
You know, I remain committed to finding solutions to all the areas of contention between the House and the Senate on VAWA. We ought to be able to pass legislation that includes provisions addressing the violence on tribal lands and the need to protect immigrant women and those who have not had access to services because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. And I'm reaching out to the House Republican leadership. I look forward to their seizing this opportunity provided by these senior House Republicans to work with me and Senator Crapo and the 68 senators from both parties who voted for the Leahy-Crapo VAWA bill way last April. Then we can complete our work, send this bill to the President before we adjourn this year. He will sign it. Because every day, every week, every month that goes by, there are more horrific accounts of domestic and sexual violence. Whether a victim in Thetford, Vermont, or Kansas City, we owe it to them to come together to find a compromise. I've said on this floor several times I still have nightmares from the domestic violence crime scenes I saw as a prosecutor in Vermont. I became a prosecutor, Mr. President, at a time when many of the laws were changing, search and seizure laws, Miranda laws, so forth. And I would go with the police to crime scenes to give them advice on what the new laws might mean. A lot of times those scenes were at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. So many times we'd see battered women, sometimes no longer alive. What's happened? So I have nightmares from those. But I remember the police who never asked, is this an immigrant? Is this woman gay or straight? Is this woman Native American or not? They just wanted to stop the crime from happening again. And we give them a lot of tools so we can do that. And the thought that our inaction could lead to more such scenes I saw there is tragic. So Congress must act now to protect victims of rape and domestic violence. I'm optimistic we can move together now that several House Republicans support a compromise position in tribal jurisdiction. I look forward to hearing from the House Republican leadership, and I ask consent that my full statement be included in the record.